Yeah, Brewer is a pretty fascinating figure in this whole thing because he's really not the kind of guy you might expect to be the top legal strategist at the NRA, because he's not a gun guy. He, at least traditionally, hasn't been a gun guy. I guess he bought a gun, right? Which he apparently didn't know how to use, according to that anecdote. And then he's also been a longtime Democrat who's donated to Hillary Clinton and Beto O'Rourke over the years. And now he's taking in tens of millions of dollars a year from the NRA for its legal expenses, and basically is the right-hand man advising Wayne LaPierre on what to do with the organization on all fronts now. It seems like a significant way he's really ingrained in the running of the organization. And that's really a fascinating part of the book, is just how he came to be that role. And I guess it stems quite a bit from Wayne's concern about what the allegations of corruption and financial impropriety could result in for him personally, right? Can you talk a little bit about that section, about Wayne's feeling about how the way that he has run the organization and the sort of personal expense issues he's run into have led to a point where now he feels perhaps backed into listening to Brewer over anyone else because he fears there's going to be some significant legal consequences for him.
Yeah, I feel like this is, a great example of why it's so important to understand the personalities and the characters of people in order to tell the story of why things happen, right? And so, if you talk to folks who've known Wayne LaPierre for decades and decades, they describe this certain reaction that he has of self-pity that's so predominant, along with anxiety, that's so predominant that when, school shootings happen, for example, his first thought isn't about the victims or even about his organization that he leads and the strategic decisions he's got to make. It's about himself. It's about his own safety. But what's going to happen to me? This is going to be so bad for me, the fallout of the school shooting. I just, and that's kind of the way Wayne LaPierre is. And when it comes to these allegations of corruption, they've been well documented, as you know, in court and in court filings, millions of dollars in private jet travel, trips to the Bahamas and Italy, lavish dinners. And as has been repeatedly said, 6 figures in suits for Wayne LaPierre from a luxury Italian men's.
Yeah, actually, there's a funny boutique anecdote in the book about that you kind of say something in here that I've always thought, which is the justification for those suits, right, is that he's the face of the NRA and he has to go and do media to represent the NRA, right? But he very rarely ever does that in reality. He doesn't do a lot of TV interviews. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, period. So, I just thought that was something that was in here that really struck a chord with me, because he's never sat down for an interview with me. And he's never sat down with an interview with a lot of people who've asked.
Well, I mean, it's easily Googleable, right? You can Google and see how often Wayne LaPierre has appeared before a camera for an interview.
Yeah. And by the way, he's always welcome.
I don't think you'll find many.
He's welcome to come on to the podcast. I'd be more than happy to host him to respond to the book, even to your book. But and I'm sure you'd be more than
happy. Am I invited for that episode too?
Yes, we'll have a whole roundtable.
Yeah. So the point of my telling these stories about his characters, they actually have, it's not just us watching this disaster unfold. There are actually real world consequences to it. And, Wayne LaPierre, it's been testified in court, has told close associates that he's worried that as a result of all these allegations and the millions of dollars of, there's no other way to put it, corruption, that he could face personal liability as a result of that, and potentially personal criminal liability. And he expressed to friends that he's worried that he could go to jail as a result of some of the misconduct at the NRA.
Sure. Although I will point out, and this is one of my criticisms of the book, right? That anecdote comes from Tony Macris, right? who said that Wayne told him the reason that he keeps Brewer around is because because he thinks Brewer is the only one who can keep him out of jail. Now, Makris said this during the bankruptcy testimony, right, when he was testifying. Now, Makris works for Ackerman McQueen, right, the top contractor that the NRA has accused of doing basically their own corruption, taking, charging them lots of money and not keeping books to indicate what they're being charged for, which is how they operated basically for 30 years. That was the kind of relationship that the NRA and Ackerman McQueen had. But this came out as part of the whole fight after the big breakup that they had. So Tony Makris obviously has ulterior motives, or he has his own motivations for why he would say something like this. And this is one thing in the book that I wonder about is like, you quote a lot from, Josh Powell, Chris Cox, Tony Makris, Oliver North, and they're painted. I don't think that you cover up their own interests. Obviously, you talk about that, and in real light, you talk about North's contract that he had with Ackerman McQueen, because we haven't gotten into it yet on this podcast. But North was the former president who accused Wayne of these extortions, sorry. North accused Wayne of basically using NRA money to pay for his own personal expenses to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, right? We've had a lot of reporting on that over the years now. And then in response, Wayne accused him of trying to extort him to retire. And you go over that very detailed and accurately in this book. I just wonder if, when I look at this situation, I guess my point here is I see a lot of people who have they all have problems. They're all a bit corrupt. They're all a bit rotten, some more so than others, perhaps. But I wonder if you rely too much on what North is saying, or the version that Josh Powell puts forward, or the version that Chris Cox puts forward, and just give them too much credence because they obviously have their own ulterior motives when they're talking negatively about the NRA or Wayne LaPierre or Bill Brewer, right? So how do you deal with that conflict there?
No, I mean, I appreciate your skepticism, right? Anytime you're doing a reporting story, you got to weigh, what are the motives of people? Why are they telling me what they're telling me? To what extent can I check it with other sources? These are the basics with journalism, and investigative journalism in particular. Now, while I didn't interview Wayne LaPierre for this book, I did have hundreds of pages of him answering questions from lawyers and trying to explain his point of view. Having read all those pages, having read Oliver North's side of the story, having read Millie Hallow's side of the story, and many other players in this saga, you kind of have to make an assessment about what it is that happened. And Wayne LaPierre's explanations for the misconduct that happened at the NRA were the least compelling and were the least convincing. That he says, for example, that he didn't know that a lot of this stuff was happening. Well, if he didn't know, he kind of wove it into his habits to make a point of not knowing what was happening inside the NRA. And there are a lot of different occasions in which it's been shown that he did know what was happening inside his organization. As the CEO and executive vice president, he has a responsibility to know. But what you see repeatedly in public comments that you've seen, Steve, and other documentation that I've seen, is him trying to pass the buck. He didn't know. Well, he should have. In a lot of cases, he should have known.